A lot of the productivity tools out there have taught us that those break-ins of time is really a kind of a bad thing, and to minimize them. Well, maybe we just need to accept that they're going to happen, and that there's always going to be an urgent sort of email that comes in, or a client that's not happy with something potentially, or a team member that wants to speak to us.
Hey guys, welcome back to episode 162. Are you still stressing with what you're doing right now in your work? Are you trying to work out how to work a bit smarter, take time off? I have a guest for you. So Chris Miran is a corporate renegade. I love how he says that, by the way, turned culture redesigner. So he, in the last year, has come out of corporate land and has his own consulting coaching business. And he's led a really interesting project, which we're going to talk about, which essentially is a 4-day work week rollout with a very large company here in Australia. He's worked with other really amazing brands like Culture Amp, Seek, Open Universities, as well as Medibank, which you're going to hear about. Right now, what he's doing is he's, as he says, partnering with incredible CEOs, founders, and executive teams to basically redesign how they work and function as a team. And a big part of that is how to actually work where you're no longer running on depleted energy and exhaustion, but how to actually build something that's amazing. We have a really great conversation about assumptions and, typically, I can't do that. How would I possibly be able to do that in my business? So we talk about that, and we talk about his journey, and we also talk about a great deal of little simple takeaways that you can do right now if you're feeling still highly stressed, overwhelmed, and that, hey, who am I to actually cut my schedule? Or how could I possibly actually get more time in my day to do what I actually want? If that's you and you're still questioning, I can't do this, then you need to listen to this episode. Here we go. Let's bring Chris onto the show. Chris, welcome to the Hustle Rebellion. How are you?
I'm great. How are you doing?
I'm good. We're going to have a really cool little chat because you literally just said you were speaking to someone about this exact topic. So I will probably extract what you were saying to that person in a moment. I love to start without going too fluffy at all. I just like to go straight into it. So I'd like to start with some tips from you, and then we'll get to know you throughout the conversation as we go, because you definitely are an expert in this space. So what are 3 tips that you can offer the listeners, whether they're on YouTube or Spotify? What can you offer us on how to grow a business with less of that hustle, culture, grind, and much more balance?
Well, I think it's such a good question. I'm no perfect person at doing this. I think the first tip would be like an acknowledgement of like we're all part of this system that has rewarded hustle, and it's how we've kind of grown up. From school, from an early, from our early childhood, we're taught and we're compared to the measuring stick.
Yeah.
And from school through to university, or if you go to uni, or if you start work earlier on, there's always a measuring stick. So I think just like affording ourselves a little bit of grace that, hey, like there's very few people in the world that have got this figured out, and I'm one of them. I'm still falling in the traps too.
Yep.
And that it's okay. And we're all kind of working our way through it. And that's probably the work to be done. I think that we have to prioritize is seeing this firstly as like the work to be done, and putting yourself first before the tasks. It's sort of that notion of being overdoing, and finding a way to recognize that this is important. I've just finished a coaching conversation with an executive in a big corporate organization, and so I'm feeling really fresh and raw about this topic. But the second one is looking at your diary. And she was sharing with me that next week they've got an offsite, and it's going to be basically she's going to be working from 6 till 9 p.m. Wow. And big. Then the day after, there's back-to-back meetings. And her goal for her own work was to be more impactful in the work that she wants to do. And I said, so we just had this really great conversation around, well, where are you spending your actual time, and why you got so many meetings in your diary when you've just said you want to create impactful work? And so I think having a look at where you spend your time, how are you prioritizing those things, and how are you making the most of your schedule is a really just simple, practical thing.
It's a good point, because around the scheduling thing, Chat GPT, right? We're all using AI these days. And one thing that I was taught like last year was put your schedule in and ask it where to have, what should you do to have more time?
I love that. Yeah.
And my big one was, hey, you have zero buffer time in between your meetings. You have zero downtime to actually, like, you're just literally meeting and then team call or this or that. And it's like, you actually have to use your schedule in a much different way than you've been using it. So it's interesting you had that chat.
Yeah, absolutely. But this is just what we've been conditioned to think, that it's perfectly normal to be running from one thing to another. So I think it's like doing a bit of an energy audit of your work and saying, where do you have those buffers? Where are you prioritizing the work that you need to do as a CEO or as a founder? How are you making those things? So one of the tips I give people is start your day with not a to-do list, but start your day with like a to-be list. Who do you want to be today?
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, tell me more about that.
Well, I
so
stole
what
this from Cameron Schwab, who's was one of the youngest CEOs of Richmond Football Club. I think probably the youngest CEO of an Aussie Rules footy club. And this concept of who are you in your day versus what are you doing? And so, I write it down I try to do it every day. Some days I fall out of the habit, but writing down all right, on my to-be list today was to feel alive, to feel generous, and to feel present. And I think starting with that intentionality in your day is super important. And then the next to that is what's the one big thing I have to achieve today? I call it an OBT. What's your OBT for the day? And for me, I'm working on my website at the moment, so that's the number one thing I've got on my list is finish that off. All these other things can be secondary to that sort of one big thing.
Well, how do you deal with the inevitable random email that comes in, whether it's, I want to work with you, or maybe it might be a team member or an outsourced supplier, whatever, a client. So you have these ideas, these intentions every day you wake up with. Then how do you deal with the things that will come in and try and derail where you're headed for the day?
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's the cliche of kind of important versus urgent, right? It's a well-known thing, but I think part of the challenge is we all know that. Lots of people have seen that framework before. There's lots of productivity hacks out there around how to structure your time, how to set up your emails, and all those sorts of things. There's two things that I think is recognizing, why do we then, is distractions a good or bad thing? Right, and for a lot of us, a lot of the productivity tools out there have taught us that those break-ins of time is really the kind of bad thing. Yeah. And to minimize them. Well, maybe we just need to accept that they're going to happen, and that there's always going to be an urgent sort of email that comes in, or a client that's not happy with something potentially, or a team member that wants to speak to us. Maybe we just need to accept that sometimes those things will be there, and that we can't solve for all those things, and that we don't need to be as efficient on email. And so I think accepting that there's going to be distractions is probably the first thing. There's always going to be those things, and can you let those go? And if you can't, why not? I was just having this conversation with the leader, and I said, what would be the worst thing if you said no to someone who's asking for your time? Well, it might damage the relationship. And I said, well, do you really know that? Or is that an assumption that you're running? I really love the Immunity to Change framework, which is done by Bob Keegan and Lisa Leahy. And the model is that you have this idea of you've got this thing you want to improve in your life or in your leadership, but we've got these hidden competing commitments against those goals. And asking yourself, why do I feel the need to respond to every email that comes in? Can I just accept that sometimes I'm not going to have an answer for everything? And that someone might be a bit frustrated with me for half an hour while I finish something that's really important. So kind of going beneath just the productivity lens is like, well, why are we struggling with this so much is my question.
It's a really good point that I probably could talk to you about for days and days. I just got back yesterday from a 2-week trip overseas, a birthday trip for myself, and I was in Dubai and London and had an amazing time. And literally 2 days before I left, my main head project manager left, so it was her last day, and everything was just like chaos. I have lots of clients and lots of projects, and the main pivotal point on my team, she left for another amazing opportunity. So it wasn't like a bad thing, but I remember thinking I had to do a lot of work in my brain when I was overseas, going, this is a moment in time that I have scheduled, that I want this trip. I have to be okay with letting some people down, and they might not even be letting them down in the first place, like you said. Yeah. But I had to change how I was thinking day to day, and so I could only work 1 hour a day. But I'm glad you brought that up, because it's an ongoing self-conversation.
Oh, mate, I think that's massive, Heather. I think that perhaps what that sort of sparked for me is like this hero mentality that we kind of do have about ourselves.
Yeah.
And look, my association with burnout was that I was working in a corporate business in a senior role, and work nearly killed me. And I had been having chest pain. So I'd been working and struggling, to just grinding through and hustling. Yeah. And I had chest pain that was coming up, and I was putting it off.
Interesting.
And I wasn't going to the doctor. I didn't want to do anything about it. I had a big presentation coming up in amongst getting this chest pain. I had a 200-person leadership conference that I was pulling together and designing and delivering part of it. And I had this chest pain while that was happening. And it kind of was grinding and hustling my way through it, and just completely ignored the symptoms. And it turns out a few weeks later, I eventually did do something about it, because it got worse. I couldn't even walk up the street anymore. And I thought, okay, this is now a signal that my body's trying to tell me something. And I went and I had a blocked artery in my heart. So I had to have a procedure, and it's all good now. But I've had to make massive changes, not only in how I work, but it changes in my mindset. And I think one of the big ones that I've realized is, and I think this is particularly true when I talk to founders, is there's almost like we think that we have so much to give, and our mission and the quest is like so important. But what's that mentality really costing us? What's that attitude that we see ourselves as so important that we can't take a week off, and enjoy it? We've got all these things there. Like, it's almost this hero mentality. And I saw that really in myself in that mode. I was like, this is so important that no one else can host this conference. Like, there's plenty of other good people around that could do it. I could take some time off. But in my mind, I'd convinced myself that I was such an important part of and that was largely my ego. Yeah.
I want to talk a little bit about your journey in your business and what you do, because you work with truly phenomenal leaders. You've sort of subtly mentioned that. You actually sent over in an email to me that you led a 4-day work week rollout specifically for Medibank here in Australia. That's like piggybacking off of what we're talking about, mindset and, being the hero, and you got to work and we've got to stay on top of things. And why would we be cutting back our work hours? Yeah. How? Talk to me about first of all, what do you do? What do you do in your business and how you work with people? And I want to know more about that 4-day work week rollout.
Yeah, awesome. Well, I guess in terms of I call myself like a executive coach or culture architect, with the two kind of hats I wear now in the consulting world that I'm doing. So there's 3 pillars of my business. One is executive coaching, and I call it more coaching transformation work. So where I help people design experiments to change how they are at work and how they lead. The second one is I do would call like team accountability practices. So how do we really use accountability as a tool for driving performance?
Okay.
And then the third part, which is more touches into the ways of working, is how do we design workplaces to be like a calm performance, like almost like these two ideas of, yes, it's about getting things done, but we want to do it in a way that is calm and energetic. So how do we look at the things that you're setting up in your business, the way of working, to structure around that?
Nice.
Yeah, so they're the three pillars of my business. So, what was your second question? Was around
the
around
the 4-day.
Yeah,
because that's huge. Like, I feel like that is such an interesting case study. It may or may not be the best thing you've ever done, but for me, it comes at me big because I'm going, okay, first of all, you have to convince not only the leadership team, but then how are they going to roll it out to their team? It's anti everything that people stand for in work in the Western world. I mean, yeah, there's the 4-hour work week from Tim Ferriss, but that's kind of pie in the sky. Oh yeah, like lifestyle entrepreneurship book, right? But how do you actually do this with real people?
Yeah, it was an amazing experience having the opportunity to do that work. I think the first thing is that what really helped get that change through was disrupting the mindsets around what people thought about work. So you can't just, in a big corporate, you couldn't just roll something like that out without having a broader strategy of what you're trying to do. And at Medibank, they had this goal of being the healthiest workplace in Australia. But they didn't really have a plan to do that. So that was my opportunity, is to take the reins, if you like, of trying to craft a plan around how we did that. But we didn't start talking about 4-day work week straight away. That took us 18 months to kind of get ready to be able to do that amidst a massive cyber incident that also took place.
I remember.
And so the strategy was, let's start talking to our team about what if work didn't feel like work, and what would it look like? And we got them to design their ideal perfect average day. And we worked with an amazing guy called Michael Dixon, who really helped us do that discovery and really understand what people were after. And through that process, we got all this data about what was important to our team. And the big theme that came up was time. And I remember sitting in a workshop in Adelaide and hearing this story of someone that worked in one of our retail stores, and she said, I've got a young kid and I don't have time to go pick them up from childcare when they're sick, or when it's because it's going to cost me, and it's going to be really difficult and challenging. And so this kind of universal thing of time just came so strongly through all our people, and that they were struggling with. They weren't asking for big pay rises; they were asking for time back. And so that really fueled then our plan of how we'd go about trying to challenge that traditional work week.
So you ultimately had them tell you essentially, what does this look like, and you really got them starting to come to the table with all of their ideas. That's essentially how the process started?
Yeah, that's how the process started. It started with the executive group as well. So before we kind of went out to the masses, we started talking to them about, well, how are we going to create this workplace that's a bit different, that is unique, and really what are the patterns and the things that we're doing in the business that are helping us to do that. And that was a really key part of the process, was disrupting that leadership group as well.
How do you get people to get out of their own way? Like, for example, when they might be talking to you and going, well, I want this, or this is something that would be amazing, but I can't do that. We can't do that. Like, how do you get them to get out of their own way?
Oh, yeah. I think challenging those assumptions. Yeah, well, why couldn't you do that? I had, it's interesting when we talked about the 4-day work week, one or two of the senior people that were a part of that experiment and pilot were sort of saying that they couldn't take the time.
Right.
That they couldn't do a 4-day work week, and it's just being prepared to say, well, why not? Why couldn't you? And and challenge that assumption. Well, what's stopping you? And importantly, if you're not doing it as the leader, how are you expecting your team to change their ways of working? And it's sort of like, that sort of phrase of like eat your own dog food sort of thing. If you've got a product out there in market and you're not leading the way doing it, how do you expect your team to do it? So I think that's definitely part of it, is just holding the mirror up to those assumptions and okay, well, what's the fear that's driving the way that you see yourself in this process, and being prepared to do that.
Yeah, really cool. All right, I want to talk a little bit about you personally and your business journey in the last year. So what's something that you feel that you have done exceptionally well in the last year?
That's a really good question. It's hard because I don't feel like I've done anything exceptionally well yet. I'm still very much growing it. I think perhaps the one thing that I'd say I'd give myself a pass on would be building a more of a presence in the community.
Yeah.
And, the fact that we're speaking is a result of that work, and getting out externally, having coffees with people, getting the message out on social media about the work I'd give myself a pass on.
Yeah.
So that would probably be one thing. The second thing is I'm really happy with how I've adapted from where I first started the business to where it is now, and being really clear on what are my pillars of the business that I'm offering and the services. When I first started, that was really kind of opaque, and just talking to people and testing out things has really helped in getting clear on what does the market actually need. When I first started, I was sharing a lot about 4-day work week.
Yeah.
And the response was probably not there yet for it. But how could I adapt that into the other work that I'm doing? And that seems to have helped.
Amazing. And I like that you said that you give yourself a pass on it rather than exceptionally well, because you just said earlier, challenge the assumptions, right? Challenge that self-talk. I feel like that's huge, that you realize that community is important. It is like, it's a common thread and theme that I'm hearing from everyone is like, get back out into the real world and meet people and be around people. And it's actually harder than it sounds on paper, right?
Yeah, it is. It's really hard to kind of put yourself out there.
Yeah.
Keep sharing the same story over and over again with people. But it is, I had a big piece of work with a client. It was a 3-month engagement, sort of in there for 3 months. And the only reason why I got that work was through LinkedIn. And someone referred me in. That they said, you got to talk to Chris about this. He's the person to speak to. So it's definitely paid off in that way. And I think you're right. I'm probably being a bit hard on myself.
You are.
And that's the hero, perhaps, the ego still clinching on.
I had to say it because we all do it. We all do it,
Yeah.
So then I'm going to flip the conversation to a slightly different direction and have you think about the last year of what you've been working on a year ago. So that would have been June, beginning of winter last year for Southern Hemisphere peeps. What would you have told yourself to do differently for the year ahead?
Oh, well, to be honest, in June last year, I was still inside corporate. So, I was in my role. And so I would have probably told myself to take a step back and to really think about taking control of my situation a little bit more. And not, I was in a situation where I was sort of going really well, but my role got made redundant. And so I had to really adapt. And I think, when you're inside, this will probably be less relevant for like founders and those sorts of things, but perhaps, when you're inside an organization, sometimes you're just so committed to the work that you're doing and you're just so driven by that. And then all of a sudden that goes. and you've got to really shift and change really quickly. So I think the thing I would have said would be have a plan B.
Yeah.
And not just be solely reliant on one way of seeing your work. I think that's kind of a universal thing. I think giving people, if you're setting up teams, you want them to be thinking about their plan B and encouraging them to go out and test the market and thinking about their career. One of the questions I always ask people in my teams, and I give this to people I coach, is to ask your team, like, how is this job helping you with the next step in your career? Like, what's the path that this is helping you on? I think the more honest you can be about where you are and what's your path, the better people are going to be. They're going to be more honest with you. But you can also, in myself, I wish I had someone kind of nudging me and sort of pushing me in that way, because I would have had a better platform to kind of then adapt.
It's really, really good. Hearing that makes me think of sort of how your identity gets tied to your work so much, maybe not on purpose. And I remember when I was, an employee and I worked for a company, and overnight, for interesting reasons, for a whole other conversation, but overnight, this project, this entire world of mine went. And it was took me a good solid year to get over it, because my identity was so wrapped up in that I didn't see a plan B. I wasn't proactive. I just was, I wasn't. I love that you're saying that, because I think it does actually work for founders as well, just as much, just for human beings that are sort of so tied to like their identity in their work.
Yeah, absolutely. And, just having a coaching conversation with this person earlier, and, she said, I love my team. I love the work that we're doing. And so much of us do have that association with, like, we do have this love relationship with what we're doing. And it's kind of like testing that out a little bit. And all right, but what else is there beyond this sort of phase of your life? And what else do you have that's fueling you outside of just the work? Because I think we do get caught up in an association and identity of who we are in the work.
Yeah. So true. What does the future of coaching look like for you, and where you're headed?
I think that it's such a good question. I don't really know in some ways.
Yeah.
I think I could make some assumptions about, AI being a really good tool to use, and that may make coaching redundant in somehow, shape or form. But I think the thing that people struggle with is less in the doing and more in the being, right? So I still see a future where coaching and perhaps will actually become even more important, because some of the tasks that we're doing just get, kind of optimized, and the machine does it all. And then so what are we left with? Well, we're left with the relationships and how you navigate those. And I think that's the dynamic that we kind of play in, don't we? And so I think the focus for me is probably less in the where do I want to be in 2 years' time with the business, and more in how do I make sure that I'm adding value to everyone that I'm kind of coming across as best as I can, and giving it red hot grow with each of those people.
Really well said. I think also you're right. The tools are there. They're becoming more and more incredible and interesting to use. But the connection between human beings is needed more than ever. So I agree with you that what you're doing is not going anywhere.
Well, I think connection seems to be, like, if you're looking at the youth coming in, and particularly with, I think it's Gen Z coming through. Is that the right? And then Gen Alpha.
I think you're right. Yeah, it's hard to keep track, but
Okay, so Gen Z is like 30% of the workforce now, I think.
Yeah.
And what they're saying that they want from work is connection, and they want it in a different way. A lot of them are saying they don't want middle management positions in organizations. And they seek purpose in the work that they're doing. So you're going to have these hungry people that are connected for connection. They're connected in to the tech, but they want meaningful work and they want meaningful relationships. So that's really interesting. I think that's the demand for how you work is really going to fuel that generation.
So As we start to wrap up, Chris, who do you work with? So if you wanted to attract another 5 amazing individuals to have that working relationship with, who would they be, and how do they seek help from you?
Yeah, so I work with leaders inside corporate organisations and founders that are setting up, their own businesses and starting to think about their leadership. It's probably not the early ones that have just building something right in the moment, but are starting to think about, hey, maybe we need to hire for like a management team, or they're about to kind of go onto that journey and they want to start. They've got a team already in place, and they're really wanting to accelerate their leadership. So they would be probably the 2 kind of main audiences, and I'm starting to do a little bit more work even with smaller businesses like tradespeople that are setting up their businesses and need some support, and they're sort of accelerating. So it can look really different I'm agnostic in what industry they work in, but that would probably be the 2 main audiences.
And then where do they go to seek you? Because you said you're on LinkedIn, which made me happy that you're doing that.
I am on LinkedIn, and you can find me at thrivenation.au is my website. That'd be the best place to find me.
It's good. Thrive Nation, cool. It has that movement sound to it. I like it.
Good. Thanks.
Yeah, really cool. What is one last piece of advice that you'd like to leave people with?
I think do an energy audit. Have a look at your calendar. Where are you spending your time? I think how you spend your time really determines the kind of quality of the time that you get. So I think that would be probably the biggest piece of advice to leave people with. It's just a really simple thing to do, but it's a really basic one that will generate a lot of value for people.
Don't you think it's sometimes the most simplistic things that actually bring the best change?
Yeah, so true. So true. It's the simple stuff that we need, not all the heavy frameworks and ideas. It's a simple.
Exactly right. Thank you so much, Chris, for being here and having this chat with me, myself and our listeners. And I love that you're committed to impact and you help others deliver that, and also that you yourself are working on getting yourself out there, because more people need these conversations that you're doing.
Thanks, Heather. I really appreciate you having me on. Great to talk to you.
You too. Thank you.